Hello, welcome to another episode of This Old Deck. So, in this week's episode, I'm going to be taking a deck from this book. I spoke about the two-bit books that the majority of these decks are probably going to come from. So this is the official Deckbuilders guide. The other one was the Deconstruction companion. I think my plan going forward with this is actually to cover decks from the golden era of Magic, which I believe is up until, I think it's Urza's Block. Now, the two books don't quite cover up to that period. So they sort of cut off around, 97-ish, I think. So my plan is to if I'm going to be featuring a deck from Urza's Block, then I need to go through sort of various things like tournament reports and the dojo. Actually, I was just looking at the release date on Deck Deconstructed Companion. Actually, it's 1999. So anyway, that covers 2 years on from this book as well. So yeah, that probably is pretty much. The other book probably covers quite a large chunk of the so-called golden era. So yeah, that's the plan going forward with this series. So yeah, if you want to check out this book, if you have this book, the deck I'm talking about is the Erosion deck, which is on page 100, and it leverages a combo, the Land's Edge Land Tax combo. Now it's in a section of the book which is called something like theme decks, but they refer to them as stunt decks in the chapter. And also they mentioned this is a type 1 deck. So it's a red-white deck, type 1. Well, as you can see, I've got the deck there. We'll look through the deck, then we'll dig deeper into the deck. So we'll do an overview, dig deeper, and then we'll go into some individual cards that are really important in the deck for this. And we can go down a few little rabbit holes. As you know, the nice thing is I've sort of split out now, and I have a separate Scryfall Shenanigans episode where we do a lot more of the going down various rabbit holes for various cards. But with this old deck series, I'm still going to go off down little side avenues for just a limited amount of cards here that are key to the engine of the deck. I'll also include a link to this article on vintage or type 1, because this is classified in the book as a type 1 deck, and it's fun to learn about, type 1, type 2, which went on to be called standard. Type 1 was sometimes referred to as classic as well, and you'll find if you own this book they often talk about classic decks. Then we've got things like type 1.5, which is classic restricted. You'll also hear that term used as well in one chapter where they also talk about a format called extended as well. So yeah, it's fascinating looking through all these different decks and the categories that were there at that time, and which ones still survive to this day. So you can look through here, learn all about which cards are banned, which cards are restricted. So with the restricted cards in type 1 or vintage, you're allowed one copy of those in the deck. And then what they did, as it mentioned here, is there were certain aspects of the banned list which were then used in Legacy. So classic restricted, then sort of morphs into Legacy, I suppose. And and so on. So it does get, that's why I'm not going to attempt to try and explain the ins and outs of this, but it's an interesting bit of Magic history to sort of look into, the initial formation of all these different formats, and how, if you've got this book, the official Deckbuilders Guide, you realise that even back then Pauper was a thing, but it wasn't necessarily called Pauper. They just happened to build some decks in here out of I think it was some cards from 5th edition that are commons only. Yeah, fascinating book. So let's just quickly look at the list of cards, and then we'll dig deeper. So 4 Howling Mines, 2 Library of Leng, 1 Zoran Orb, 4 Enlightened Tutor, 2 Fire Blast, 1 Wheel of Fortune, 2 Wrath of Gods, 4 Land Tax, 4 Land Edge. So, you know, the main part of the combo package is enchantments. And then this weird thing, we've got 36 lands, which will make sense in a moment when we look at the individual cards in more detail. So 16 mountains, 16 plains, 4 plateau. Now, in the book, it's in the stunt deck section as a combo deck, and under the theme deck chapter. I'm not sure what form this took in terms of something that was played effectively in tournament. So I'm not sure about that. But I just thought it was an interesting deck because it's another one, nice follow on from last week, where you'll notice no creatures. And it plays around with hand size or populating of hand, but in a slightly different way, because you're leveraging the presence of land. Consequently, you'll notice that the sideboard here is just a few general cards that might deal with certain broad matchups. So we've got things like Armageddon, which will actually just completely blow up all lands. We've got 3 Disenchants, which is a way of dealing with enchantments or artifacts. And then we've got a number of cards here that sort of turn this deck, I suppose, into a burn deck. I mean, it's a burn deck already because of the way the combo works. But yeah, it's interesting to see the cards in here. So we've got, classic things like Fireball. We've got some more Fire Blasts, which you can get into play quicker by sacrificing mountains. We've got 1 Jockelhoops, which is a sweeper that buries all artifacts, creatures and lands. Just 1 copy of that in the sideboard. And then 4 Lightning Bolts. Okay, so let's look at the deck a bit more here, a bit more detail, specific cards. So first of all, we've got the artifacts. So 4 Howling Mines, 2 to cast. Each player draws 1 extra card each turn during his or her draw phase. So everybody's drawing land each turn. Extra land. I'm sorry, I meant to say land. I mean extra cards. So yeah, everybody's drawing extra cards. We've got 2 copies of Library of Leng. So this is an interesting card in that it's one of these no limit to the size of your hand cards, but and this will be a bit clearer when we actually look at the card. It's got this business where it says if a card forces you to discard, you may choose to discard to the top of your library rather than to your graveyard. If discard is random, you may look at the card before deciding where to discard it. So there's this interesting top deck manipulation, but it nerfs discard in some way, and also it has this thing where it doesn't limit the size of your hand, which is really useful for what you're going to be trying to achieve with this deck. We've got 1 copy of Zoran Orb, and this can just sit there and we can use it to sack lands to gain 2 life. So, keep us in the game if for some reason our life is getting low and we haven't really managed to fully leverage the combo here. So we've got 4 copies of Land Tax, 1 to cast. It's an enchantment, and during your upkeep, if an opponent controls more land than you, you may search your library and remove up to 3 basic land cards and put them into your hand. Reshuffle your library afterwards. And we've got 4 Land's Edge, 1 and 2 red, enchant world. Any player may discard a card from hand at any time. If that player discards a land, Land's Edge does 2 damage to target player or the discarding player's choice. So of course the idea here is to discard as much land as possible, so that when it comes round to the upkeep phase, you're going to have less land than your opponents, And then you can search out basic lands. So you'll see this fluctuation in your hand size as this sort of goes on. Now, the other thing that helps out here is, of course, the Library of Leng, because your hand size can go up to ridiculous size for any one of several reasons in the deck. And it doesn't matter. You're not going to have to discard any cards, so therefore you won't be discarding any land. Now, to help out, we've got 2 enchantments here, so why not have 4 Enlightened Tutors, which searches out a library for an artifact or enchantment card, and reveal that card to all players, shuffle your library and put that revealed card back on top of the library. So it goes on top of the library, not into your hand, and that's 1 to cast. And we've got 2 Fire Blasts, which is this 4 and 2 red burn spell, does 4 damage to target creature or player, so it's flexible, but it's pretty high cost. However, you can choose to sacrifice 2 mountains instead of playing Fire Blast casting cost. So yeah, you can look at it as another way of, using lands as a resource. Or in this case, specifically using mountains as a resource. The Land's Edge uses any lands, but the Fire Blast you can leverage mountains instead. Got obviously a lot of land here. We've got 16 mountains, 16 plains here, which is rather handy because of the way the decks works. And we've got 4 plateaus to, fix the fact that with plateau or plateau helps with mana because we can tap it for either red or white. So this is the original very expensive dual lands. Just if you're curious, what I opted to do with this is all of these cards where they would use core set cards are using the beta versions, and that's just so the corners look correct versus any other cards from, say, Ice Age. Anybody that knows the way the cards are will know that the alpha cards have a slightly different corner on them. Yeah, so we're playing cards here from beta. I was originally going to do the cheapest alternatives here as well, but I thought it was more fun to put, older black border cards in here. We've got 1 Wheel of Fortune. So 2 in a red, sorcery, both players must discard their hands and draw 7 new cards. So the amount of cards you draw isn't based on how many cards you have in your hand. So that would be a good one to play where you've got nothing in your hand. 2 Wrath of Gods, so that destroys all creatures because you don't have any creatures here in this deck, so you don't care if you start blowing creatures up. In our sideboard, 3 Armageddons, which will just completely wipe out all the lands in play, 3 Disenchants, 3 Fireballs. So this does X damage. Does X damage total divided evenly, rounded down among any number of targets. Pay 1 extra mana for each target beyond the first. So it's X and red. The Disenchant is 1 and a white. Target enchantment or artifact must be discarded. And then we've got the 3 and a white Armageddon. Some 2 more copies of Fire Blast. 1 Jockle Hoops, which is also 4 and 2 red, buries all artifacts, creatures and lands. And then 4 Lightning Bolts. Single red, awesome red spell, does 3 damage to any one target. So yeah, you're just sort of turning the deck into more of a straight burn deck to some degree, I suppose, if needs be. So I think the sideboard here, like I said, it wasn't specifically flagged up as a tournament deck. There's a section in the book about tournament decks. It wasn't specifically flagged up as such. So I think looking at the sideboard, this is just, general sensible cards to play with this sort of deck. But again, for various proper tournament matchups, some of these cards you might want something that's a bit more appropriate. But interesting to see, a deck from that period, so you know, up to including what did I say, 1997 when this came out. And what would be the oldest cards in here? So we've got some Legends stuff. Would it be? It would be Visions, wouldn't it? I think. Yes, because those are Mirage. So Visions. Do we have anything from Tempest? I don't think so. No. So yeah. Visions, and I think, as I pointed out, if you see me do, there was a video I did where I went through this book. This book in 1997, Tempest has just come out, basically. So the Mirage block is out, you know, everything before that, and you just got Tempest. And that's it. Okay, so let's dig a bit deeper into the individual cards. I'll include links to all of these so you can sort of play around with the stuff and look at them. Yeah, so the land tax, banned in historic. It's been reprinted. Let's just look and see. Actually, that's one thing I like to try and do in this episode. So, because we're not dealing with many cards, we can have a look a bit at the different artworks. You can see it's turned up a few times as like, I don't know what you call, like a special reprint type of thing. And it's also in the list, and it did turn up in Double Masters, funnily enough, and Battle Bond actually. That's online. Judge's gift card, that's Master Edition 3, which is online. But it was in the Battle Royale box set. Interesting enough. I think I've said I've seen one of those. Wish I'd bought it at the time, actually. Pro Tour Collector's Set, which predates the specifically dated Pro Tour decks, where, you know, they're done by the year. I think the Pro Tour Collector's Set was the first of the Pro Tour things to come out. And here we've got, this is the Renaissance version. You know, you can see there's various versions here. Legends. It was in 4th edition as well, so that's going to be a cheaper version of it. But we've got the Legends ones in the deck. So the 4th edition, $18. Oh, so these are all gold border ones. Yeah, so you can't fetch any of the snow-covered lands, since they all... Sorry, what am I saying? You can't. Sorry. You can fetch any of the snow-covered lands, since they all have the super type basic. Yeah. Yeah, notice as well it's basic lands here, so you can't use it to fetch your dual land, your plateau. It's not a basic land. It's a non-basic land. The ability has an intervening if clause. That means 1, the ability won't trigger at all unless any one of your opponents controls more lands than you, and 2, the ability will do nothing if you control at least as many lands as each of your opponents by the time it resolves. You shuffle your library if you search, even if you don't put any basic lands into your hand. The lands go into your hand. Yeah. And it's under the category of catch up. Players who have less get more. So it'd be interesting to see, you know, if you went through this systematically, what other interesting combos there might be, where you can sort of, one card you use whatever it is you're being caught up with. One card uses them as a resource, and then one of the cards in here, the catch-up card, is used to replenish your stock of them. So, tutor land basic, tutor to hand. Yeah. Usual stuff now. Again, oh, you can see that there's Aerial Surveyor as well. Yeah. And Cube Cobra, maybe look and see if there's anything any ideas we might get from the synergistic cards. You can see there's quite a number of white cards here that it's often drafted with. There's a Enlightened Tutor, funnily enough. Oh, Baneslayer Angel. Okay. So yeah, looks like a lot of cards that would be in a mono white deck. There's balance as well. One of the players more lands in play must discard it. So that's where the player who has more lands has to discard land. So it's slightly different. So you're equalising a number of different things as lands and creatures. This is an interesting sweeper wrath effect, which is stapled onto Magenta the Lion. It's a little bit later in Magic's history. Okay. Land's Edge from Legends. Also reprinted in Chronicles, so if you want a cheap copy of this, you can get one for $1. Don't think I have this card anywhere. Okay, what do we got? Notes and rules information. Okay, the damage done when you discard a land only applies to lands which are discarded by choice using the Land's Edge ability. It does not work on forced discards of any type. This has the super type World. Okay, so this is good. When a world permanent enters, any world permanents that were already on the battlefield are put into their owners' graveyards. This is a state-based action called the World Rule. The new world permanent stays on the battlefield. If two world permanents enter at the same time, they're both put into their owners' graveyards. So that's pretty major thing. So yeah, World Enchantment. Right, Skyfall Tagger. Any player ability, burn player, discard outlet, removal, planeswalker, burn, symmetrical, discard type matters. 39 any player abilities. Infinite Hourglass. What's that? During your upkeep, put a time counter on Infinite Hourglass. All creatures get +X +0, where X is equal to the number of time counters on Infinite Hourglass. Any player may pay 3 during any upkeep to remove a time counter from the Infinite Hourglass. These are always interesting things to go through in multiplayer, because it's always cool to see like what party cards or group hug cards might there potentially be here, or the reverse of that. Ones that cause pain to everybody, and you try and sculpt your deck so it causes less pain to you. Yeah, so that's a cool little rabbit hole to go down. Ether Storm. Creature cards can't be played. Pay 4 life. Destroy Ether Storm. It can't be regenerated. Any player may play this ability. Okay. Excavation. Sack a land. Draw a card. Any player may play this ability. Yeah, it's actually, I didn't mention it. There's some interesting stuff. Because I think there's a typo actually in the description of the deck in the book, because it starts talking about prosperity, which isn't in the deck, but prosperity would be a relevant card if you happen to be playing blue. So yeah, you could probably put together a red, white, blue version of this, which could have additional components in it, which would help with the engine. These old decks really fascinate me. Okay, drafted with, well, yeah, burn, red, white, burn stuff, and there's as well synergistic cards. What have we got? More red, white aggro shenanigans, I think, probably. With a bit of blue there. Also fun to see, again, another creatureless deck, I think. I'm always intrigued by those, having been more used to, creature-based decks from when I first started looking at Magic around about the time of 10th edition. Okay, classic 6th edition. One thing I didn't do, let's just look. And, well, actually, there's not much to look at here, is there? It's just, no, I did look at that. Okay, Enlightened Tutor, view all prints. There we go. Dominaria Remastered. Oh, this was, so when they do the ones for the list that crop up randomly, you notice they use the original card, but then there's this little symbol in the bottom corner. Now, Eternal Masters, I remember it. And it's quite nice because it was reprinted in, Classic? So reprinted in Classic 6. And there was a version of it turned up as an Arena League one, which is in, that looks like that's foil. But we didn't have foil, did we? Or was it until, I'm trying to think the point at which they started introducing foil cards generally. So 6th is just before that point where you could have maybe pulled a full version of this in a pack. So in a pack of early cards. I'm just intrigued by, you've got this Black Border 6th edition. How much is that? $167. I mean, obviously later cards in Magic's history there's going to be foil versions, but I'm always intrigued by cards that turn up as sort of foil black borders of core set cards which have had white borders on them. So, Right. The shuffle and put the card on top is a single action. Okay. Scryfall Tagger. So there's the cycle of 1 CMC tutors, if you're curious. Let's look at the first printing version, so we can sort of see here. So you can see Enlightened Tutor from Mirage. If I put them in release date order, it's probably a bit easier to see now. And do that. Ascending, there we go. So we've got 3 in Mirage, 1 in Visions, and then the final one in Urza Saga. So because that spreads over multiple blocks rather than just multiple sets, it's not just a mega cycle, it's a mega cycle, I believe. And there was a cycle from Eternal Masters, or it was included in that cycle. Idyllic Tutor, similar to, what does that do? Search your library for an enchantment card, reveal it. So that just does enchantments. And there are a number of cards that will tutor for enchantments, which is probably the most important aspect in this deck in terms of getting that particular core combo. But it's obviously nice to have the fact you can do as artifacts as well, because there's other artifacts in here that you want which leverage the whole having or contributing to excess cards, or being able to utilize excess excess lands. And Cube Cobra, probably same sort of stuff we've seen before, So some red white stuff. Generally, obviously, good in any deck where you want to be hunting out enchantments or artifacts. Yeah, there's another sort of balancy type card there where you're searching library for plains card. If you control fewer lands than target opponent, you may search your library for an additional plains card, reveal those cards to all players and put them into your hand. Shuffle your library. That's from Visions. But that just does plains. Land tax, if you remember, does basics. Howling Mind. Howling Mine. This has been, yeah, reprinted quite a number of times. The first time I would have seen it would have been in 10th edition. But you can see he had various artwork treatments. This is the original artwork. I don't know if you can see that with the corner I'm talking about. See the corner on an alpha card, slightly different than on a beta. So you've got alpha, beta, unlimited, then the collector's edition stuff, then revised. It's a farm like border, and then we sort of go into 4th edition. So it was kicking around in 4th edition, 5th edition, 6th edition, 7th edition. So in the core sets, 8th, 9th, 10th, M10. And then, yeah, so on. So, Commander product several times. And then in the retro artifacts frames. And then we got this 30th edition thing. I don't know what everybody's favourite artwork is. I do like the old school artwork. The only problem is, of course, if you want this for, you want that old school artwork in a black border, then I suppose what your first price wise, yeah, it's going to be your cheapest, because the early stuff, I bet, is yeah, quite expensive. Yeah, I do like this artwork, I must admit. But then it's like, it's a bit, you know, I suppose biased because that was my step on set for Magic, so it's often you have the fondest memories of artwork from the first set you encountered. This is interesting, the old style in a new frame. I can't remember if I have an old version of this, you know, as a 4th edition or 5th edition. Yeah, I'll have to look through, see what I've got. Maybe stick it into one of the future 15 cards episodes. Oh yeah, deprecated untapped artifact. Oh, that's right. Yeah, because this had a continuous artifact as originally as its type. You've called symmetrical, group hug, repeatable draw. Yeah, so there's dictate of crucifix. Does this sort of thing. Font of Mythos. It's a 4-drop. Temple Bell, which is cropping up in, well, by the time you see this video I would have already put it out, but yeah, it was one of the artwork videos. And then we got some stuff here where it's actually stapled to something. Interesting way of doing it. Down to repeatable draw. There's quite a number of cards that do that. What about the... Yeah, so until the 6th edition, artifacts were deactivated when they were tapped. people may not even know this. These cards from prior to 6th edition have that behaviour baked into their current rules text. So just 6. There's a winter orb. Oh yes, icy manipulator. Hypnotic spectre. Yeah. Synergizing with other cards that produce excess amounts of mana. Yeah, because of course you gotta. How do you play into a situation where everybody's just drawing cards? So yeah, it's basically working out synergies where you can leverage that. So some rules here about what happens when it leaves the battlefield before it resolves. Doesn't trigger at all if this is tapped at the start of the draw step, and it checks this again on resolution. The additional draw step is separate from other draw. During your draw step, it happens when the triggered ability resolves. The triggered ability is put onto the stack after you've already drawn your card for the turn. Okay, Library of Leng. Yeah, I do have a copy of this. I can't remember what version. Not this. Maybe a 4th edition, perhaps. Yeah, I did buy a single of it. What am I doing? There we go. Yeah, so this is the point. So this is online Master Edition. What's that for? So that's when they use the, you have no minimum hand size wording. Is that the first time they use it? Yeah, you can see here they slightly worded it for 5th edition. I wonder if my version might be the 5th edition version actually. Skip your discard phase. When a spell or effect forces you to discard a card, you may instead discard the card to the top of your library. Yeah, I think whatever version of it I've got is more like this actually. Yeah. Just an interesting, I mean, I know this might be considered to be better ways of doing the maximum hand size thing, and I know there's quite a number of cards I'm sure we'll see in a moment. But it's interesting in combination with this effect. If an effect causes you to discard a card, discard it, but you may put it on top of your library instead of into your graveyard. So quite a number of rules there. And this effect has no effect on cards that are being put into the graveyard from the library because they are not discarded. So it won't sort of turn off, straight mill from the library. Only acts as a sort of mitigating thing for where you're having to discard cards, and you can choose to put them back on your library. Sometimes you might want to be discarding to your graveyard with this in play. You can't use Library of Leng's ability to place a discarded card on top of your library when you discard a card as a cost, because costs aren't effects. The discard triggers anything else that triggers on discards. You can look at randomly discarded cards before deciding where it goes, which I think is in the earlier version. It specifically mentions that. The ability applies any time a spell or ability has you discard as part of its effect. It does not matter if you or an opponent control the spell or ability. The discard is forced because it's an effect. If more than one card is discarded due to a single effect, the library allows you to. Hang on. This makes sense. The library allows you to decide whether or not to use it in each of the cards. You get to decide the order the cards are placed on the library if more than one goes there. Okay. Since the card goes directly to the library, the card is not revealed unless the spell or ability requiring the discard specifically says it is. The ability places the normal discard action with a discard action that puts the card on the library instead of the graveyard. And if multiple effects modify your hand size, apply them in timestamp order. For example, if you put Null Profusion, an enchantment that says your maximum hand size is 2, onto the battlefield, and then put Library of Ling onto the battlefield, you have no maximum hand size. However, if those permanents entered in the opposite order, your maximum hand size will be 2. So that's quite a good point where you've got cards that sort of contradict one another, how you would deal with that. Okay, alliteration, hand size increase, rules nightmare, discard matters, hate discard, and virtual legends. Let's look at rules nightmares. Cards that are known for interactions that are difficult and nearly impossible to resolve without comprehensive rules. Okay, there's quite a number of classics there. Yeah. Oh look, there's Ice Cauldron. That's funny. Oh yeah, Illusory Mask. Alright. Virtual Legendary. We've other episodes where we've done this sort of looking through decks and looking through Scryfall. Yeah, we've seen this sort of stuff. So there's quite a number of these cards, as well, I say 115, where possibly because they were printed before Legendary existed, which is usually the case. They weren't considered legends, but if they'd been printed after, then maybe they would have done. I mean, there's a few here where you can see they were printed after legends existed and they're still not legends. But it's often their name might indicate that they could be a legend or something about them. Candles of Ling. If you've got library, you might as well have the candles, I suppose. Yeah, not so good in multiplayer format though. That one. Often drafted with, and we got synergistic cards. Oh, some nice artifacts. And we've got some stuff here, obviously, that's help you draw stuff. Right, Wheel of Fortune. Ooh. I do actually have one of these. So banned in Legacy, restricted in Vintage. It is one of the Vintage restricted cards. So that's why, I'm assuming, we have one copy of it. I wondered that. Useful card. Both players must discard their hands and draw 7 new cards. And it's a Summer Magic Edition. There's the revised one. What's this? From Black Border. So it did crop up in Vintage Masters. Magic Online Promos. 4th edition. And there was a DCI Judge's Gift Card. But of course, bear in mind, Vintage Masters, that's the one that was only available online. I did draft this one time, I think. One weekend. So, discard hand, symmetrical discard outlet. You've got Wheel of Misfortune. Magus of the Wheel. So turn a red for a 3/3 with a run 1 and a red tap ability on it. You sack it and then each player discards their hand and draws 7 cards. With a potential. which plays around with okay, energy. Yeah. Symmetrical wheels. So yeah, you can see similar thing on other cards. So blue and red. There was a green card here with the this card here. So you can definitely see where, if you were thinking about modifying the deck, I haven't mentioned all of these, but we are going to see some cards where they've got bizarrely centered text instead of the way we're used to seeing it. That probably come up quite a bit. Yeah, anyway, so modding the deck, there's some blue tricks you can get up to with this deck if you introduce blue. I don't know whether the fact you've now got a fix for 3 colours of mana makes it a little bit trickier. Whether that undoes the advantage of having access to blue. So that might be something to consider. What do we need? Okay. Oh, lots of lots of restricted cards here. Often drafted with other powerful cards. Oh, red stuff. Yeah. Oh, there's a bad lens. Yeah, pyretic ritual. And of course, Lion's Eye Diamond, which when it first came out, wasn't it considered to be a bad card? Took a while for people to clue on to how to leverage that, discarding your hand or not. Because it just says discard your hand, and we've spoken before about the whole thing of discarding your hand. So it doesn't necessarily mean your hand has to be full. So with the right combination of cards, Lion's Eye Diamond, very powerful. And we get Zoran Orb. So this is interesting. So if you've got loads of land, this is in the deck. It's a not die card, so you can use it to sack a land and gain 2 life. Just keep you in play for a little bit longer. 0 to cast and 0 to activate. So pretty handy utility. Hasn't been... Oh, hang on, yeah. So the version I've got would be my one from the vaults. I can't remember if I've got a copy from Ice Age or not. I might have, because I did open some... I opened like a few packs and a Ice Age starter deck back in the day, which unfortunately I never did on camera for some bizarre reason. Might have been in the real early days of the channel. But yeah, so you can pick up later versions. Wow, the Modern Horizons one is only 27 cents. There you go. Yeah, these are interesting. These warped quite badly. If anybody's got them, probably knows that. There's various tricks you can utilise to try and straighten them, but yeah. A lot of this sort of special foiling they used on from the vaults, caused all sorts of warping issues. It made it even more warped than usual, I think. Yep, so free sack outlet. So not necessarily same sort of decks, but there's a whole load of cards that fall under this category that are really interesting to have, or really useful utility in cards where you're the basic part of the deck, or its engine, whatever that might be, you know, sorry, however you're achieving it, but is sacrificing stuff. And so, yeah, this is quite an interesting one to just include into that. If your deck is sacking stuff and you need, you just want to have this in there to add to the theme so that you can sack a land to gain 2 life. Maybe you do want land in your graveyard. And there are 223 sack outlet land cards, of which, out of curiosity, those are all the artifacts. Ooh, things like excavator. What was the... If I do is first printing. Does that change anything much? Just looking at the early stuff. Ooh, okay. Oh, Hammer of Hammer of Perforos. Okay, so I'm just going to loop back to land tax here. We'll just take a quick look at land tax in EDH. So yeah, number of decks. You can sort of see the sort of commanders that might be there for the sort of deck it's in. And then Enlightened Tutor again. Oh, what's that from? It's interesting artwork. And then Land's Edge. Do we see this much in Commander? Let's have a look. 662. Not so much. Oh, it's in there's a few Zedru decks. Okay, let's have a look at Howling Mine. Now I've piqued my interest. Oh, of course, yeah, Cameo of the Crescent Moon. Think of a blue super party deck with Party Jace. Ooh, Feldergriff deck, yes, of course. Fun times. And the Why Not Library of Laying, how popular is that? You can see. So yeah, I mean, just an interesting utility card, but there's other things that, you know, yeah, because my mind's gone blank now, but yeah, I think you know the sort of cards. There's another artifact that does the business with the hand size, and then there's a land, isn't there, that does that as well. But as I said, that I like that combination with the protecting you from discard. I think that's cool. Okay, I think that is it for the moment. I just want to look at one more thing here, which was, I don't think I went into hand size increase. I don't know how I've discovered this card originally, so it's not the sort of card I would usually stumble across, but looking to see where. So yeah, Spellbook's another one. That was the one I was trying. Oh, Reliquary Tale was the one I was trying to think of. So you've got things like Spellbook, which does this, just do the, you know, have no maximum hand size, and that's cropped up in quite a few core sets. This is from Conflux, and at one point, wasn't this card fairly expensive when EDH Stroke Commander started to really be a thing? Yeah, so we've got Venser's Journal. It's nice when they sort of double up with something else. I mean, the spellbook here just has the hand size business. The Reliquary Tower does it with mana. Venser's Journal does it with gaining life for each card in your hand. Thought Vessel does it with mana. So that's a sort of mana rock version of Reliquary Tower. But I think, isn't it the case that Reliquary Tower, is that the only land that does it? I think that's right. Oh, is that a flippy land? Yeah, okay. It's a flippy land which has this on the other side. Can't remember. I'm just calling them flippy lands. I'm trying to remember what their correct term is, because they're ones, aren't they, where you can choose when you play it which side to play. I think that's right. So like a choice card. Artifact. Here we go. So there's all the artifacts. Decanter, Endless Waste. Okay. There we have it. Hopefully you enjoyed another episode of this old deck. I will be looking through the books again for the next episode, which normally these come out just in under once every month roughly. Thanks once again for watching. Bye for now, and I will catch you in a future episode.